Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. It's my pleasure and great honors to carry commentary on Professor Khurshid book entitled Pakistani Maishat Ki Surat Hal, Masail, Asbab aur Layamal. The author deserves appreciation for taking of a comprehensive text that covers state issues and strategy of the economy of Pakistan, that currently in deep recessions and stagnant in the vicious circle of low economic growth, high inflation, and high unemployment from the last couple of years. About structure of the book, in the first part, Professor Khurshid talk about macroeconomic policy and planning. The second part comprised Professor Khurshid commentaries, critical review, suggestion and recommendation on federal budget in different years. The third part of the book discuss and cover some important issues and challenges facing Pakistan economy, inflation it causes, oil prices, supply issues, and electricity production, distribution, and price determinations. In the first part, the author mainly focus on the role of international organizations, institution in the design and structure of macroeconomic policy and planning in Pakistan, and argue that since 1980, most of the macroeconomic policy structure and design in the domain of Washington Consensus under the umbrella of international organizations like IMF, World Bank, and Asian Development Bank. And this structure and design of macroeconomic policy under the umbrella of international organizations pose some obvious consequences to the economy of Pakistan. Being a student of Pakistan economy, I agree with others, and I hold some queries. First is Professor Khurshid highlighted in his first part why Pakistan economy is foreign driven, why foreign factors, external debt, foreign aid, remittances, to some extent FDI play a vital role in the growth and development process of Pakistan. This is first query highlighted in this book. The second query is why we have good economic performance in autocracy, means in Ayub era 1960, Zia era 1980s, and Musharraf era, and why we badly fail in democratic era, 1970, 1990s, and post-Musharraf. This is mainly highlighted in Professor Khurshid's book. I think why we have good performance, despite the fact that strict management and sincere efforts from both bureaucracy, military and civil bureaucracy in 1960s. But I think Pakistan membership in mid-1950s, CENTO and CETO membership is the root cause of this impressive economic growth. That Europe and US bent toward Pakistan, international institutions, IMF, World Bank, provide space and trade and aid, and we have all macroeconomic indicators have positive trend. Same in 1980s, in Zia era, Pakistan strictly involved in Afghan war. Once again, Europe and US bent toward Pakistan, and Europe and US and these organizations provide space in foreign aid, extend Pakistani quota, easy access to external debt, and foreign aid, remittances, and FDI. And once again, Pakistan have good macroeconomic indicators, have good performance, investment to GDP relatively very high, and this impressive economic growth from 6 to 7%, saving to GDP is high, tax to GDP is high, low fiscal gap, and low current account deficit, and obviously the mass decline in poverty. Third time in Musharraf era, once again Pakistan strictly in war against terrorism, And again, Europe and US bends toward Pakistan. These organizations, IMF, World Bank, and many other organizations provide space and aid and trade and external debt. And once again, Pakistan have good performance. But why we badly fail in 1970? Why we badly fail in 1990s? And why we badly fail in economy is stagnant since post-Musharraf, and the low economic growth is earlier I mentioned, and high inflation and high unemployment. I think Professor Khurshid rightly pointed out that mostly we design our macroeconomic policy and strategies in the domain of Washington consensus under the umbrella of these institutions. And we have ignored endogenous resources that God gifted. We have endogenous resources in both form, physical capital and human capital, but unfortunately we haven't utilized it potentially. Look, strategic location of Pakistan. This is one God gifted. We share border with 3 Asia: technological rich Asia, East Asia; human capital rich Asia, South Asia; and we just a step away from resource rich Middle East and Central Asia. We have the most fertile land of the world in the form of Indus Basin. We have largest canal system. We have huge water reservoir in the form of glacier. And the most important, we are passing through demographic dividend. More than 60% of population is working age population. But why? We badly fail. Why the economy is currently stagnant? And why in deep recession? I think Professor Khurshid rightly pointed out that heavy reliance on these external factors, external debt, remittances, foreign aid, and underutilization of these endogenous resources are the root causes that economy is stagnant and the low economic growth, high inflation, and high unemployment. These policies, underutilization of this endogenous resources and heavy reliance on external factors, and designing a macroeconomic policy in this domain of international organizations and Washington consensus, push the economy and deep structure issues. Historically, we are running our economy with 3 gaps. Saving investment gap. Professor Khurshid quoted some example that India and China have almost 35 and 40% of saving to GDP, while Pakistan is just 15 to 18%. Why we are always saving investment gap? Why economy we have huge gap in export and import, huge trade deficit, and why fiscal gap? Why huge gap between public revenue and public expenditure? This is just because of, Professor Khurshid pointed, this is just because of underutilization of endogenous resources and heavy reliance on external factors and designing of macroeconomic policy and strategy in the domain of Washington consensus. I think to get right of these challenges, especially to overcome the issues of fund deficit, we must have to work, and matters should be addressed on both export and import, on both public revenue and public expenditure. On export front, I think we must have to work, not this cosmetic way, depreciation of exchange rate against US dollar. This is, I think, traditional tool, and this is one cosmetic and traditional way, cosmetic way. The durable solution is we must have to work on export. We must have to make our export value added. We must have to hunt new market for our export. We must have to work on the dimension of export. Why still focus on traditional market, Europe and US? East is growing. We share border with the second largest economy of the world, China. and these East Asian economies are growing. Middle class is expanding. Why not dimension of export change? We have Central Asia, that Muslim countries, and we have some common traditions and especially religion. Why not focus on Central Asia? We must have to work on diversification. This is dynamic approach. And again, we also have to work on import. And again, this not just cosmetic way. Again, this need dynamic approach. We must have to work on fiscal gap. And again, matter should be addressed on both public revenue and public expenditure. On public revenue side, we must have to increase tax net, and we have to replace indirect taxes with direct taxes. And again, non-developmental expenditure should be revisited. If the economy has such structural issues, especially this trend deficit, how we can keep balance with Washington consensus? If we are facing this huge deficit, trade deficit and fiscal gap, how we can keep balance with Washington consensus, with IMF, with World Bank, with Asian Development Bank, and with other countries? We must have to work on it. If this is Washington consensus or Beijing consensus, the potential gain of both consensus, I think we need Islamabad consensus. अगर हमने पोटेंशियल यूटिलाइज करना है वाशिंगटन कंसेंसस को भी और बीजिंग कंसेंसस को भी, तो इसके लिए इस्लामाबाद की कंसेंसस, जिस तरह हमारे डीजी साहब ने ही मेंशन कि अभी ये टाइम है, हमने वर्क करना है, और ये किसी एक पार्टी के बियॉन्ड द कंट्रोल ऑफ एनी सिंगल पार्टी, गवर्नमेंट अपोजिशन, सब ने अगर वो सिंसियर है, हनेस्ट है, तो उनको चाहिए कि अपना इस्लामाबाद कंसेंसस डेवलप करे. This need development of consensus in Islamabad, जितनी भी स्टेक होल्डर है. अभी इस प्लेटफॉर्म से एक मैसेज वी वांट टू कन्वे कि दिस इज टाइम, अपने अनाज से निकलना है. चार्टर ऑफ इकोनॉमी, ग्रैंड डायलॉग इज इशू ऑफ द डे, और इसके लिए सब ने आना है, अपने अनाज से निकलना है. अपोजिशन ने भी, गवर्नमेंट ने भी. अदरवाइज इकोनॉमी, अल्लाह ना करे, पाकिस्तान इकोनॉमी इज वेरी क्लोज टू डिफॉल्ट. Islamabad consensus is very important. I agree with Professor Khurshid at the end. No Masiha will come to fix our problem. We have to stay in this world. We have to stay and survive in this integrated and globalized world. At the end, I am very thankful to Dr. Abdul Rashid, DG IIIE, and Dr. Hamid Hassan, Head School of Economics, for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.